Shalom, Israel. It's your brother Marcus G back with yet another truth for thought. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to the Most High. I must, first and foremost, give all praises, honor, and glory to the Most High. Secondly, I am so happy to be back. As many of you know that follow me, myself, as well as King Mike Malice, King Yal Gideon, King Yada. I have been on a rest. I didn't realize I really needed to rest, but yes, I actually did need to rest. And I'm so happy to be back. With that, I want to say to you, Israel, to the royal family, to the whole nation of Israel, thank you so much for one, understanding that I needed to rest, two, observing that and allowing me to rest, and three, for the warm welcomes back from the completion of said rest. Now, we're going to get right into some of the major things about the topic for this truth for thought. So I want to start by, let me share my screen. We're going to go to the Bible first. So I want to start by going to 2 Chronicles. We're going to go to chapter 8 and verse 13, because as you see from the thumbnail, the title of this truth for thought is the significance of the moon in regards to Israel, the significance of the moon. So we're going to start at 2 Chronicles chapter 8, verse 13, and it reads, even after a certain rate, every day, remember that word, day, offering according to the commandments of Moses on the Sabbaths and on the new moons and on the solemn feasts, 3 times in the year, even in the feast of unleavened bread and in the feast of weeks and in the feast of tabernacles. Now, there are a couple of things, and let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to go over a couple of verses, and there are going to be some common denominators or some words that I want you to definitely just jot them down out of these verses. In this verse, I want you to jot down Sabbath, new moon, solemn feast. But I want to ask a question before I go to some other verses that are going to have some of those same common denominators. You see here the Feast of Unleavened Bread and the Feast of Weeks and the Feast of Tabernacles. Now, I didn't realize until asking several Israelites, some that have been in the truth for many a years, do you know what the Feast of Weeks is? So I'm gonna take about 10 seconds or so to allow you to answer, what is the Feast of Weeks? And we're gonna get a little context about the Feast of Weeks. So we're gonna give you a little time to answer the question of what is the Feast of Weeks? So now what I want to do is I want to go to Exodus. And again, we're going to come back to the verses after we just look at the Feast of Weeks. We're going to come back to the verses that are going to have those common denominators that I asked you just to jot them down. So we're going to go to Exodus 34 and 22. All right. Exodus 34 and 22. And thou shalt observe the Feast of Weeks, of the first fruits of wheat harvest, and the feast of ingathering at the year's end. I'm going to ask again, what is this Feast of Weeks? And I'm asking this right now for a reason, because you're going to see a little later on about the difference in times. When I say that, you have days, you have weeks, you have months, and you have years. All right. And as far as in the Bible, I'm not talking about just in the world, because you get to talking about the world essay, something like 6 o'clock. You can't find 6 o'clock in the Bible. But it is an increment in which man observes time. Man does observe time in such an increment. So from there, we're going to go to Numbers 28 and 30, 28 and 26. Numbers 28 and 26. And it reads, also in the day of the first fruits, when ye bring a new meat offering unto the Lord, after your weeks be out, ye shall have in holy convocation, ye shall do no servile work. So in this Feast of Weeks, you do no servile work. But I'm asking again, what is the Feast of Weeks? Okay. So now we're going to go to Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy chapter 16 and verse 10. And it reads, and thou shalt keep the Feast of Weeks unto the Lord thy God with the tribute of free will offering of thine hand, which thou shalt give unto the Lord thy God, according as the Lord thy God hath blessed thee. What is the Feast of Weeks, Israel? What is the Feast of Weeks? So now we're going to go to Leviticus. Leviticus 23. And we're going to drop down to verses 16 and 17. And they read, and even unto the morrow after the seventh Sabbath. I want to stop right there because we're going to go into the Sabbath a little bit today. I did a lesson on the Sabbath. We're going to kind of go into the Sabbath a little bit today, but for a different reason. But the Sabbath is the seventh day. Every 7 days is a week, right? So with that in mind, let's keep that in mind. Even unto the morrow after the seventh Sabbath shall ye number 50 days, and ye shall offer a new meat offering unto the Lord. Ye shall bring out of your habitations 2 wave loaves of 2 tenth deals. They shall be of fine flour, and they shall be baken with leaven. They are the first fruits unto the Lord. But this happens during the Feast of Weeks. So for anyone who does not know what the Feast of Weeks is, the Feast of Weeks is Pentecost. Pentecost. That is 50 days from the Passover. So, and I know I asked a certain particular queen, what is the Feast of Weeks? And she was doing some research on it. Queen, if you hadn't found out what it is, this is the Feast of Weeks. The Feast of Weeks is known as Pentecost. It's just a gold nugget that I put in here because the moon is significant in regards to time. And again, we're going to look at, I decided I was going to look at time as far as days, weeks, and even we can even go into years, but I'm not going to definitely go into years, but definitely days and weeks, especially seeing that, remember those words I had you to jot down? The Sabbath is one of them, which is a 7-day week. All right. So now, with that, we're going to go back to looking at verses like that. So again, we started, I'm going to go back to the verse we started out with, which is why I asked you all, what is the Feast of Weeks? Going back to 2 Chronicles 8 and 13. And we're going to read it again. All right. And it says, even after a certain rate every day, offering according to the commandment of Moses on the Sabbaths and on the new moons and on the solemn feasts 3 times in the year, even in the Feast of Unleavened Bread and in the Feast of Weeks, Pentecost, and in the Feast of Tabernacles. All right. So we're going to go from there to, we're going to stay in 2 Chronicles, but we're going to go to chapter 2 and verse 4. And we're going to, again, I'm looking for some key words and for a very, very specific reason in regards to the moon. All right. So we go into 2 Chronicles chapter 2, verse 4. Behold, I build an house to the name of the Lord my God, to dedicate it to him and to burn before him sweet incense, and for the continual shew bread, and for the burnt offerings morning and evening on the Sabbaths and on the new moons and on the solemn feast of the Lord our God. This is an ordinance forever to Israel. Basically, this is saying it is an ordinance to observe the Sabbaths, new moons, solemn feasts. Okay, but you see those same words there, right? So now I want to go to Nehemiah chapter 10. Going to Nehemiah chapter 10. And we're going to verse 33. For the shew bread, and for the continual meat offering, and for the continual burnt offering of the Sabbaths, of the new moon, for the set feasts, and for the holy things, and for the sin offerings to make atonement for Israel, and for all the work in the house of our God. Now, a lot of people are probably wondering, a little more in depth about what these verses are for. A lot of them are showing things that you are to do, especially with when the sacrificial law was still in place. Okay, so we're going to go from there to First Ezra. We're going to go to the Apocrypha. First Esdras chapter 5 and verse 52. But you should have noticed some of those same words in Nehemiah 10 and 33. So First Esdras 5 and 52. And after that, the continual oblations and the sacrifice of the Sabbaths and the new moons and of all holy feasts. So again, you have the same things even here. We're going to go a little bit further. And the reason I'm doing this is because I want to show you first, per Isaiah 58 and 10, for precept must be upon precept, precept upon precept, line upon line, line upon line, here a little, there a little. So if it is something that is definitely true, and in the Bible, you will find it in several places. As you can see, we've been in Old Testament and now in the Apocrypha. So we're going to go to Judith and we're going to get chapter 8, verse 6. And this is in regards to Judith, right? And she fasted all the days of her widowhood, save the eves of the Sabbath and the Sabbaths and the eves of the new moons and the new moons and the feasts and solemn days of the house of Israel. Again, you see the same key words. And I'm bringing these key words up again for a reason. And we're getting there. So now let's go back to the Old Testament. We're going to go to Ezra chapter 3 and verse 5. And after, again, this is in concerns with the sacrificial law, but I want you to notice what is all in here. And afterward offered the continual burnt offering, both of the new moons and of all the set feasts of the Lord that were consecrated, and of everyone that willingly offered a free will offering unto the Lord. So here you see the new moons and you see the feast day. All right. Now I want to go to Psalms 81 and 3. And this is the last one we're going to get in regards to these key terms that I had you to jot down. So Psalms 81 and verse 3. All right. Blow up the trumpets in the new moon. Now we kind of narrowing down to just the moon. Blow up the trumpets in the new moon in the time appointed. Remember that prepositional phrase. In the time appointed. On our solemn feast days, you're going to read a precept to that. In the time appointed on our solemn feast days. But here you see the new moon. The new moon. So now let's look at those common denominators. Right? You saw Sabbath. You saw new moon. You saw feast day. But I want to ask you, Israel, a very serious question. In all of those, did you ever read about a lunar Sabbath? In fact, I'll go even further. Is there anywhere in the Bible that you read those words, lunar Sabbath, and the observance of those in regards to Israel? There is nowhere in the Bible that you can see lunar as the descriptive word for the Sabbath. Nowhere. So I'm going to do a lesson on the lunar Sabbath and letting you know, one, where people derived it that, and two, to further prove that there's no such thing. But I'm just going to basically cover it right now. Okay. So let's go to, we're going to start at the beginning. We're going to go to Genesis chapter 2. We're going to get verses 1 through 3. Now, this was the Lord's Sabbath. And this, again, I did a lesson. It was called the Sabbath. I did a truth for thought. It was called the Sabbaths. And even there, you learn that this was the Lord's Sabbath. And this was the Sabbath which we were to observe. So we're going to get Genesis 2, 1 through 3. And we're going to see if we find lunar Sabbath anywhere. Thus the heavens, because again, this is the Sabbath that the Most High observed. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the hosts of them. And on the seventh day, God ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day from all of his work which he had made. And God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it he had rested from all his work which God created and made. Now, where do you see lunar? Nowhere. All right. But that is the Sabbath that we are to keep, the Lord's Sabbath. And I went in depth on that in that Truth for Thought that's titled Sabbath. Now, I just want to go real quickly to Leviticus 23. And we're going to go to Leviticus 23 a couple of times today. But we're going to get Leviticus 23, and we're going to get verses 1 through 3. All right? And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them concerning the feast of the Lord, which ye shall proclaim to be holy convocation. Even these are my feasts. Listen to verse 3. 6 days. 6 days. Not 6 lunar days. Not anything lunar. 6 days shall work be done, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of rest, a holy convocation. Ye shall do no work therein. It is the Sabbath of the Lord in all your dwellings. It does not say it is the lunar Sabbath. It does not say anything about the moon, and there's a reason why. Because we're going to find out what the moon is for, the significance of the moon. Now, I will not tell you that the moon does not denote an appointed time, as we read a little earlier. I said, remember this. Read it in Psalms 81 and 3. I want to tell you that it does not denote appointed time. All right? But I will tell you, it is not in regards to the Sabbath. All right? But I want to prove it in another place. And a lot of folks don't go here to prove this. I want to go here. Let's go to Ezekiel 46. We're going to go to Ezekiel chapter 46. And we're going to get verses 1 through 6. All right? And it reads, saith the Lord God, the gate of the shall be shut the 6 working days, but on the Sabbath it shall be open, and in the day of the new moon it shall be open. It very specifically says 6 working days, which are the 6 working days of a week, which we look at the one feast that is the feast that is appointed by weeks. That is the Feast of Weeks. Okay? It's 6 days, and then it's the 7th day or the Sabbath. Let's keep going. And the prince shall enter by the way of the porch of that gate without, and shall stand by the post of the gate, and the priest shall prepare his burnt offering and his peace offerings, and he shall worship at the threshold of the gate. Then he will go forth, but the gate, listen to this, shall not be shut until the evening. Now, the Sabbath is observed from sundown to sundown. from the eve in Genesis, after each day, it says, and the evening and the morning were each day. There is no irony or coincidence. So the Sabbath, even here, there is something that significantly happens in the evening. And this is why not only, if you're going to follow the Lord's Sabbath, you have to do it just as it's written in Genesis, right? Well, we know in Genesis that the evening and the morning, that's the cycle in which the day went, the evening was the beginning. All right. Let's keep going. Likewise, the people of the land shall worship at the door of this gate before the Lord in the Sabbaths and in the new moons. Now, where do you see lunar Sabbath? You see the moon, but it's in regards to the new moons, and there is a significance in the new moon. Let's keep going. And the burnt offering that the prince shall offer unto the Lord in the Sabbath day shall be 6 lambs without blemish, and a ram without blemish. And the meat offering shall be an ephah for a ram, and the meat offering for the lambs as he shall be able to give, and a hin of oil to an ephah. And in the day of the new moon. So that was talking about the Sabbath. Didn't say lunar Sabbath, just says the Sabbath. So now it's talking about the new moon, which it did mention the new moon up in verse 3. And in the day of the new moon, it shall be a young bullock without blemish, and 6 lambs and a ram, they shall be without blemish. So you see here that the different sacrifices that were made in those different days in regards to the Sabbath and the new moon. But the new moon has to be significant because its sacrifice is different. Not only is it proven here that it's of significance, but in all the other verses where I said, remember these words, Sabbath, new moon, and feast day. Okay? So, and that's kind of going to be the segue, as now we're finna start getting to the meat of the topic of this truth for thought, which is the significance of the moon. All right? So I want to start this by I want to start this section of this truth for thought by going to Psalms chapter 8 and verse 3. All right. Psalms chapter 8 and verse 3. When I consider thy heavens, the work of thy fingers, the moon and the stars, which thou hast ordained. There is a key term in this verse. Yet again, I want you to jot it down, and it is ordained. Because I also said, remember, back when we was in Psalms the last time, Psalms 81:3, you're going to see some things like appointed time. So here you see the moon is ordained. It's appointed for something, right? So let's go from here to the letter of Jeremiah. We're going to go all the way back to the Apocrypha, right? We're going to go to the letter of Jeremiah, chapter, it's only one chapter, but we're going to verse 60, all right? And it reads, for sun, moon, and stars being bright and sent to do their offices are obedient. Write that word offices down. It's ordained to do something or hold an office. And they are obedient. The sun, the moon, and the stars, they are very obedient to that which they are ordained to do. Okay? We're going to leave from there and go to Jeremiah, back to the Old Testament. Then here a little, there a little. Jeremiah 31 and 35. All right. And bear with me, Israel, because I'm taking you somewhere. We're taking real baby steps, but I'm taking you somewhere with this. We're going to Jeremiah 31 and 35. Thus saith the Lord, it's the Most High, which giveth the sun for a light by day. Remember that. The sun for a light by day. We're going to get a precept from that because we're going to go back to Genesis. And the ordinances, drop that word down yet again, of the moon and of the stars for a light by night, which divideth the sea when the waves thereof roar. The Lord of hosts is his name. Here we see ordinances. So the moon is again made mention with being ordained for something. Okay? All right. So now we're going to go to Genesis chapter 1. Genesis chapter 1, we're going to get verses 14 through 16. And God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night. So these lights were ordained to do that. And let them be for signs. They're ordained to be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. And let them be for lights. So they're also ordained to be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth as it was so. And God made two great lights. The greater light, the sun, is ordained, or it is to rule the day, and the lesser light is ordained or to rule the night. He made the stars also. So I want you to remember those. Think back to those words: ordained, ordinances, and offices, and obedience. All right. So the offices that the moon has, now I'm going to be more specific. I'm going to go into just the moon and not so much as the sun and the moon and the stars. But in regards to just the moon, the offices that it holds is for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. It is ordained for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. Same thing, all right? Now, of those that, and we're again just specifically talking about the moon, of those that it is ordained for, I want to take a look at these things that they are ordained for, right? And the ones that I want to look at is these three: signs, seasons, and days. All right? Because the Sabbath is made of certain days, and then there's the seventh day or the Sabbath, right? So let me stop sharing my screen. I got to share my screen with something else. So now we're going to look at this right. I'll go with this one here. Every day, every day in those 6 working days, and on the 7th day, the sun comes out and the moon presents her perfection. And I'm using that particular word for a reason. Every day, you'll see the sun and you'll see the moon in her perfection. In one of these, which are her phases of perfection. And I'm wording it that way for a reason. They want to jot that down. The phases of the moon's perfection. All right, but that happens every day. It happens every day. And 6 of those days are work days or servile days. And the 7th day is a holy convocated day, or the Sabbath. Those 7 days comprise of a week. Again, like I said, we're going to be talking about some increments of time. Those 7 days comprise a week. And we also looked at one of the feast days known as the Feast of Weeks. And we're going to look at some of the others. Not all of the others, but some, as you're going to see a common thing in regards to those that differs from the Feast of Weeks or Pentecost. Okay? So now I want to go back to the Bible. Okay? We're going to go back to the Bible because we just looked at days. Just looked at it, the moon being ordained for days, right? Those are all facts. Every day, the sun rises, be at the will of the Most High. The sun rises, and the moon shows some phase of her perfection. I worded it that way for a reason. You're going to understand that the deeper we get into this. But now I want to go back to the Bible. I'm going to go back to the Bible, and we're going to go to Joel. The reason we're going to go here is because now we're going to look at some of the signs, again, of the moon, that the moon is ordained to do. I've done a lesson on this sign that the moon does, as this particular sign happened earlier this year, in March this year. But we're going to read about it, and we're going to see how true, how obedient, which was one of those words back in the letter of Jeremiah 1:60, how obedient the great lights and the stars are. Okay, so let's go to Joel 2:31. And it reads, the sun shall be turned into darkness and the moon into blood. Has anyone ever heard of or looked out and saw a red moon? And I did a lesson on blood moons earlier this year, because we had one of the longest ones of history. I want to say it was 84 minutes. For 84 minutes, the moon was red. But let me go ahead and read this, because we're just looking at signs in regards to the moon to show its significance and the things that it's ordained. And it is ordained for days. We touched on that. It is ordained for signs, and we're touching on that now. So Joel 2:31, and it says, the sun shall be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before the great and terrible days of the Lord come. Now, this is a prophetic verse. However, the moon into blood is what you and I more commonly today would know as a blood moon. All right. Now, that's not to say, because I promise you, if the Most High wants the moon to literally be covered in blood, he will do it. But I'm saying as a sign, as we read back in Genesis, that is a particular sign of something. As you see, before the great and terrible day of the Lord come, that's a sign that that day is to come. Now let's go to Acts chapter 2 and verse 20. Going to the New Testament, Acts chapter 2 and verse 20, and it reads, "The sun shall be turned into darkness," the precept, "and the moon into blood before the great and notable day of the Lord come." Same thing, but it is a sign. Here you see the moon being a sign, something it is ordained to do. It has done this in the past. It did it earlier this year in March. It is very obedient. Very obedient. Now let's go to Revelations. Again, prophetic verse. Another very prophetic verse. This one too, a prophetic verse. You go to Revelation 6 and 12, and it reads, "And I beheld when he had opened the sixth seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as the sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood." Again, something that we more commonly know as a quote unquote blood moon, but the moon is very obedient. The moon has emulated this before. It has done this before. This sign has been shown before. Okay. So we looked at days, the moon in regards to days, right? And we looked at signs. So now I want to go to seasons, which those are the three that I said I was going to address when we were back in Genesis 1 and 14 through 16. So now I want to go to seasons. And to do this, I want to start by unsharing my screen. Because I got to share a different screen. Hold on. Get it where I need it to be first. Get my screen where I need it to be so that when I share it, you'll understand. So let's go here. Share screen. Now, for those of you who don't know, this is the BLB or Blue Letter Bible. Very good tool. Not available for the Apocrypha, is available for the New and Old Testament. And I'm about to show you one of the many things about this tool that I love. Now, remember when we was in Psalms 81 and 3, it said appointed time, and it also includes the words the holy feast. Was not ironic. It's not coincidental. So I want to start by going, okay, we'll start at Genesis 1 and 14. Right here. And God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven, and to divide the day from the night." Again, looking at what these lights are ordained to do. "And let them be for signs and for seasons." See that? And for days and years. In fact, we're looking at the third. We looked at days, we looked at signs. Now we're going to look at seasons. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to the interlinear. And we're going to, and as you see, this is that verse. And said, God, let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens to divide. You see all of what makes up that verse, right? But I want this particular part right here. And for seasons. And here you see the word from the Hebrew. Moade. Moade. I'll see. It might. You want
Page 4150.
Moade. Moade. And you see right here the biblical uses of that word. Now, that particular part of that scripture in Genesis 1 and 14, and for seasons, it was transcribed from the Hebrew word moed. All right. Let's look at the definition of moed. Appointed time. How much irony. As we read in Psalm 81 and 3, in direct regards to the moon, appointed time. So we're going to go. What I want to do now, I want to prove that that's the case. So we're going to go to another verse. We're going to go to Leviticus. Leviticus 23. And we're going to go to verse 4. Now you see, and we're going to read this again. Leviticus 23 and 4. These are the feasts of the Lord, even holy convocations, which ye shall proclaim in their season. Let's see what that is. All right. In their season. Here it is, right here. In their season. Same word. Same thing.
Page 41.
Same biblical definition. Appointed time. So when the Bible in its context in Genesis 1 and 14 and in Leviticus 23 and 4, when you see in their season, in their appointed time, in their appointed time. So now, with the understanding that the moon is to this point, understand the moon is ordained for signs and for seasons and for days and for years, but we only touched on days, signs, and seasons, right? Now I'm going to stop sharing my screen because now we're going to get into some things in regards to the high holy days, how to keep the high holy days, how even in the wilderness, our ancestors were able to keep the high holy days. It's because they had an appointed time. And that appointed time was marked with a sign in the moon. In the moon. This moon, the moon, which was also ordained to show for days and signs, but it was definitely ordained for seasons. Now, nowhere, again, kind of reflect back on this lunar Sabbath thing, nowhere have we seen that it was ordained for a lunar Sabbath. Nowhere. Can you see it? All right. So let's go and let's really kind of break down a little more the significance of the moon. All right. Because a lot of people, especially around the feast days, and I was on break. I was resting during a lot of feast days, Feast of Tabernacles, pants while I was on my rest. A bunch of the feast days happened while I was on my rest. Where a lot of people, Day of Atonement, a lot of people didn't know when these days were. Okay. So I'm going to give you all some golden nuggets for you. This way you'll know, or you'll at least have the basic knowledge of said appointed times. All right. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen. We're going to go back to we're going to go back to the Bible. Oh, 1 second. Let me set this back up. So I could have did it in the blue letter, but I'm going to go back to the Bible that you all are used to seeing when I put it up. So we're going to go back to the Bible and we're going to go to Ecclesiasticus. We're going to go to Ecclesiasticus. We're going to go to Ecclesiasticus. We're going to go to chapter 43 and we're going to go to verses 6 through 8. In regards to the Most High, right? He made the moon also to serve in her season, in her appointed time, for a declaration of time and a sign of the world. Now, we kind of hit on some of the things that this is talking about. But let's read because it gets more detailed. Verse 7. From the moon is the sign of feast, a light that decreaseth in her perfection. Remember, I said every day, you get the Most High will, the sun shines and the moon shows some phase of her perfection. This is why. This is why. And I'm going to break it down a little bit more with the help of some aids that we're going to look at. But then I want to drop down to verse 8. This is in regards to Israel. The month is called after her name. Make a note of that. Each month is called after the name of the moon. I'm going to say again, make a note of that. Each month is called after the name of the moon, increasing wonderfully in her changing her phases of perfection, being an instrument of the armies above, shining in the firmament of the heaven. So now I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Stop sharing my screen. And I'm going to share my screen again. I'm going to share my screen again, and we're going to go to some basics right here. If you didn't see it, didn't make note of it, in a prime time for Israel that I did, it was called High Holy Days and Feast Days. High Holy Days and Feast Days, not holidays. In that, I present this. And what this is in Hebrew, the months, which are called by the moon's name, that's very, very significant. The months of the year. Listen to this, Israel. This is it when the Israelites were not in captivity. Always have been these, always will be. And I'm going to kind of explain them a little bit more, but I just want you all to understand what you're looking at. There were righteous Israelites in both the northern and southern kingdom. And they were able to keep the high holy days. Even though those months, which are called by the moon's name, were named something different. And here you see the names of those months. The northern kingdom went into Assyrian captivity. Those righteous Israelites, they kept the high holy days and feast days of the Most High. They kept them. And these were the names of the months, which are called in the moon's name. But this is what they were called. Now, they knew the months as this. Eventually, they started knowing the months as this as they are in captivity, right? The southern kingdom in Babylonian captivity. There were some righteous Israelites there. There were some. And there were some that kept the high holy days and feast days. And these were the months as they knew them in the captivity. I'm going to let that be there for a minute. Because at the very least, this I implore you. Write these down. The one in the slot 4 where it says Hebrew, write those down. Very significant. Very, very significant, as they are the calendar for Israel. The very first month of the year for Israel is known as Nisan or Abib. Nisan or Abib is also known as the season of the green thumb. So there's a season when this month is there. There are signs that this is the month of Nisan. I'm going to kind of go into that today. But you may want to write these down. Down here, you see Adar is the 12th month. You know, I know it's some people that's probably counting like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Well, Adar is the 12th month. What is this Adar 2? Oh, this is what's known as the double Adar or second Adar. I'm going to explain that a little bit as well. I'm going to explain that a little bit as well today. All right. So I'm going to go from there. I hope you all made a note of those. If you have to come back and watch it again, pause it to, jot those down, that's fine. But for the sake of time, I have to keep going. So there you saw the months of the year, right? So now what I want to do, I'm going to share my screen again. And we're going to look at a couple of things. We're going to look at a couple of things. All right. So here, I'm going to start with this right here. Yeah, we'll start with this. Now, like I said, every day, be it the Most High will, sun raises. These are the signs of a day, or the great lights. They were ordained for days. They were ordained for seasons and they were ordained for signs. So every day, sunrise. We're going to look at June of 2023, right? This is what happened in June, or what they're saying will happen in June of 2023. And I picked this out for a reason, actually. So in June of 2023, man is saying that Thursday morning the sun is going to rise, right? Thursday evening, the moon is going to look like this, right? But notice how this upper left-hand corner is not quite a full moon yet, but it is one of her phases of perfection. Then Friday, the very next day, sun's going to rise, sun's going to set. The moon should look like this. And you look, it's almost all the way. It's not there, but this is the moon and one of its phases of perfection. Then you have a full moon on a Saturday. A couple of reasons I got. Well, not this one, but there's a full moon on Saturday, right? One of the phases of the moon's perfection. Now, I'll say that to go to this. We're going to read a little something. There are many, today, man's science, and I'll show you, there are many phases that man wants to term as phases of the moon that you will see throughout any given month. Because remember, per Ecclesiasticus 43, the month for you, Israel, is called after the moon's name. All right. So every month, it literally says showing her changes and her perfection. That's all you can read all this in Ecclesiasticus 43, 6-8. I'm just summarizing, showing her different perfections as she changes, right? Every month she does this. She's ordained to do this. The moon is ordained to do this. So let's look at this. There are 4 principal lunar phases in Western culture, known as the new moon, first quarter, full moon, and third quarter. I want you to remember that you see new moon here. And when we started this lesson, some keywords that I want you to write down: Sabbath, new moon, high holy days, those. But you see new moon as one of the phases of her perfection. You see the new moon, first quarter, full moon, and third quarter. These phases last for around 7.4 days. However, they vary slightly due to the moon's elliptical shaped orbit. Okay. There is some truth in that. I will tell you that, and I will break that down in another, that actually, it'll come down to the numbers. Is something that I'm going to do when I really go in on this lunar Sabbath thing. But there is some truth in there. I will tell you that. There are also 4 intermediate phases. Remember I said man wants to put all these different phases. Basically, I want you just to remember new moon, first quarter, full moon, third quarter. In actuality, yeah, just for a basis, I would want you to remember. Now you're going to see these 4 intermediate phases, the waxing crescent, waxing gibbous, waning gibbous, and waning gibbous and waning crescent. You're going to see them in a couple of other things that I'm going to show you, okay? Apart from a couple of craters near the lunar poles, such as the famous Shoemaker crater, all parts of the moon are susceptible to around 13.77 days of light, followed by 13.77 days of night. All right. What I want you to take from this is right here. 4 principal lunar phases known as the new moon, first quarter, full moon, third quarter. Okay, so now I'm going to stop sharing my screen because I got to share my screen with a different picture. Okay, so I have to stop sharing it to show you this that I'm going to show you right here. Now, let me share my screen again. Share my screen. Now, here you're going to see not only those 4, but the other 4 that they throw in there, right? Again, you're going to see a full moon. Now, again, these are the 4 that I want you to really pay attention to. Full moon, last quarter moon, new moon, first quarter moon. Those are actually just the only ones that you actually need to properly keep the high holy days and feast days. Those are the only, all the other signs of her perfection, all that man wants to call the waning gibbous and the waning crescent and the waxing crescent and the waxing gibbous, matters not. That's just man want to put a term on any and everything. Okay. So let me stop sharing my screen again. Okay. Because we got to something else that we got to move to the next thing. And share it right now. And it's basically that same thing. It's the moon phase. This is a chart of the moon phases again. I wouldn't necessarily say to necessarily concern yourself with the waxing crescent and the waxing gibbous, the waning gibbous, and the waning crescent. But the 4 phases that I would say for you to at least be able to look into the sky and know that this is what it is a new moon, quarter moon, which it can be the first quarter or the last quarter, and the full moon. All right. We're going to go from there to this. We're going to go from there to, I want to go back. Let me see. At this point, I want to go. Yeah. At this particular point, I want to go back to the Bible so that I can try to properly show you this. Okay, so we're going to go to Leviticus again. Leviticus chapter 23, verses 4. So we know that a month is called after the month. We're going to look at Leviticus 23, verse 4. These are the feast days of the Lord, even holy convocations, which ye shall proclaim in their seasons, in their appointed time. And we went and saw that straight from the Hebrew. In the 14th day of the first month. So there's an appointed time for the Passover. This is in regards to the Lord's Passover. The first month, which if we go back, I'm going to share this again. The first month, as you see here, is Nisan or Abib. You also see it even in the Bible as Abib, Abib. That's the same month, Nisan and Abib. If you wrote these down, you can put in parentheses Abib next to Nisan. All right. In fact, there's another slide that I'm going to show you, and it's right here. I want you to pay close attention to this one. Starting right here, Nisan, the very first month of the year. Remember I said Nisan or Abib means the season of the green thumb. Look at the color. It's green. It's the season that you would know is spring. So somewhere in the season of spring is when you'll find the sun. All right. And you go this way. As you see, the colors change. You go to the summertime and the fall and the winter time. You see the seasons. And this right here is if you have a double Adar. And I think at this particular juncture, I want to kind of go and kind of dwell on this a little bit. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to share my screen with something else. Share my screen with something. So we just read about the Passover, right? We just read about the Passover. All right. I would tell you that back in 2013, you see, this is a calendar of 2013. All right. In 2013, and the new moon is what calls in the months for Israel. Okay. So back in 2013, the new moon that called in the month of Nisan or Abib was on the 11th. Well, could have been on the 11th, or it could have been right around here in April. Now, how would I know whether it was here or there? And I'll explain that to you. Because again, the name of the month or what the month's, the definition of the month will tell you, well, it is the month of the green thumb. So it will be the transition from winter to spring. If back in 2013, if there was still frost on the ground, if there were no leaves on the trees, if there were the grass wasn't starting to get green again right here, and let's say it's already been 12 new moons for 2012, right? Then this new moon right here will be what's known as a double Adar, because it's not showing the sign of the month of Nisan or Abib. It's not showing the sign of the season of the green thumb. If there was still things like other little signs, like the leaves on the trees are not growing back, the grass is not getting green again, the grass is still brown, there's still a bunch of frost every morning on the ground. So let's say those conditions were still here on the 11th. And we'll say that the prior new moon was the 12th new moon of 2012. This will be the 13th month of that year. Because the month has to also be in its season. You can't have Nisan in the winter season. And I'm saying that because there are people that don't really observe the moon, and they'll say, and let's say those conditions were here, it was still the winter season on this new moon. But they observed it as the first month of Nisan, or the first month of the Israelite or Hebrew calendar, which is Nisan. Well, per Leviticus 23, on the 14th day, so that will make this the first day of Nisan. 14 days later, the 25th of March is when they would have observed the Passover. This, Israel, is how the high holy days gets messed up. Right here. Every year, first of all, it is not guaranteed. It is not set in stone. Let me put it that way. Let me use that word. It is not set in stone that every year we'll have 12 new moons. Sometimes there's a 13th month, a 13th new moon, because it is not the season for Abib. Man cannot make this Abib if it is not the season for Abib. Not even Israelites. If this is still the winter season, you still have the things that go on in winter happening right here, then no, it's impossible for this to be the first day of Nisan or the first day of Abib, which will make it impossible for this, which will be 14 days later, will be the 14th day, for this to have been the Passover for that year. But now let's say that there had been 12 new moons, and on the 11th, there were the signs of the season of the green thumb. Then yes, this would be the first day of the first month that's called by the first new moon, in which those signs are being shown, in which there is no frost on the ground. It's not showing signs of the winter season. It's showing signs of the season of the green thumb. Then yes, this would be the first of Nisan or the first of Abib. And right here would be the proper day to observe the Passover. Now again, that's saying that back here at this new moon, none of the signs of the season of winter were present. But all the signs of the season of the green thumb were present. So, this is how, and it starts at the very first month of the calendar. If you're off on the very first month, you're going to be off throughout the rest of the whole year. It's in it. And I want to explain that off, okay? Because there's a difference in off. Now, let's say that this next new moon, right, happened right around here, which it'll be what, like April the 2nd. This is just saying, for instance, this is a hypothetical situation. Let's say, for instance, in 2013, on the 2nd of April, was the first new moon where it truly showed signs of the season of the green thumb. Okay. Which meant that, and let's just say this was a 13th month. Let's say that the 12th month of Adar was way up here, the new moon way up here somewhere. So this new moon was, and again, we're just saying hypothetically, was a 13th month. It was still the season of winter right here at March the 11th. Okay. So then the new moon that follows, which will be around right up in here somewhere, right up in these 3 days here, would be the first day of Nisan or Aviv. Because this is another thing that Israel will mess up. Israel will say, well, April is Nisan. Just there are people in Israel that just say April is Nisan. Which is why I said, when it said that the phases of the moon, there is some truth in there, are roughly about 7.4 days for each one of these phases. It's about 7.4 days, each of the 4 main phases, right? It usually is a span of 7.4 days in between each, right? That would mean a month by the numbers is about 28 to 29 days, 28.5 to be. And I can break that down it is in the Bible. And I'm going to, and I really, because that's also significant when it comes to that lunar Sabbath. So when I do a lesson on the lunar Sabbath, I'm going to really break that down by the numbers, and you can see it in the Bible. It's proven in the Bible. Okay. So let's say that the new moon fell around April the 3rd. Well, even people in the truth, there are some that just flat out say, well, April is spring. So April the 1st, and that's per man's calendar. But you got to understand, the feast days were not written on the calendar that man derived at eventually. Feast days their appointed time weren't based on what you know as April. So this is yet another way that Israel messes this up. They try to dumb it down, so to speak. Say, well, we know that April is springtime. We're just going to say April the 1st. So on the 14th of April, that's when we are going to observe the Passover. Well, I'm going to go and I'm going to give you this example again. Let's say this was the first day of Nisan. Then on the 14th day, this would be Passover. Nowhere near. And this is on man's calendar, you see, March. There was a possibility that back in March of 2013, on the 25th of March, depending on that new moon and what signs were being shown during that new moon, there's a possibility on the 25th of March, that was when the Passover should have been observed, right? But we got some Israelites that say, no, I'm going to wait on April the 1st because I know April is, and that's because they're not observing the moon, right? So now let's say that the new moon right here truly indeed was not the 1st of Nisan or Aviv, right? But that the 1st of Nisan or Aviv was right here. And let's say this is the 3rd of April. Right? Again, there are people that say, well, I'm the 1st of April. I know it's spring. So they'll observe it on And that first example is how you can see the difference as far as weeks. Somebody, well, I know a person that I noticed in the truth, they observed the Passover 2 weeks ago. Then I know someone who observed it 2 weeks later. This is how that happens. So then you will have some that say, well, I observed the Passover 3 days ago or 2 days ago. Now I'm going to give you an example of how that happens, right? Let's say again, there's an Israelite that says on the 1st of April, that's the first of the sun, or a B for me, it's the 1st of April. Well, if the new moon isn't until the 3rd of April, 14 days, on the 14th of April, you're going to be observing, one person's going to be observing the Passover, while on the 17th, someone else is observing the Passover. But this person is observing the Passover because they are keeping up with the moon. Okay? Now, the reason I say there's different degrees of being off, and you can see that's off. That's off by just 2 days, while the first example was off by 2 weeks. Now, I'm going to show you the worst example of being off, right? The worst example of being off. This is still the signs of winter. This should have been a double Adar or second Adar. It should have been a 13th month because we're still showing signs of winter, right? But somebody didn't pay attention to the signs, and they said, this is the first of Nisan. Then they celebrate the Passover right here, and it's in the season of winter. Now, if I remember correctly, back in Leviticus 23, it says, these are the feast days and high holy days to be observed in their season. Is the season of winter the season of the green thumb? That's 2 different seasons. That's way too off. When you have certain people observing, and I'm going to use the Passover because it's the first major high holy day, and it's in the first month. And usually, again, the first month, if you're not observing the first month correctly, it's going to throw the whole rest of the year off, right? Because if you're observing this as the first month, but it's in the season of winter, everything's going to be off by at least 2 weeks. You don't see another new moon for at least 2 weeks. It can be thrown off as far as 28.5 to 29.5 days. That's roughly a month. This is how some people observe Passover a month off. A month before it's supposed to be. This is how this happens. This is how it happened. Because this month should have been a second Adar. But in that second Adar, or double Adar, they're observing the Passover. It's not in its season, and it's going to push all their high holy days off for the rest of the year. The rest of the year. And the reason that I'm kind of going in on this is because a lot of Israelites have come to me, and it puzzles them. Like, why? You're saying the Passover is this, but I'm telling you, I keep up with the moon. I keep up with the moon, so I'm definitely, because I want to follow the scriptures to the T. It says that these high holy days should be in their season. I do not want to be observing the Passover in the winter season. To avoid that, I keep up with the moon. Right? In their appointed time. The definition for season, right? If someone has just made up in their mind that April the 1st every year, no matter what year it is, that is the first of Nisan or the first of Abib, they can throw themselves off. Especially if the next new moon until the 6th or 7th of April. The first new moon of the spring season, because it's at that new moon, again, per Ecclesiasticus 43, 6 through 8, that's when the month is called, that new moon. So somebody that just automatically say, just every year, I don't care, it's too complicated. Every year, I'm just going to do this. I'm going to show you, Israel, how easy it is. You find somebody that keeps up with the moon, right? And ask them, when do you have recorded for the first of Abib? And let's say you ask me, this is what I would say in that instance. And let's say it was back in March 2013, March 11th, right? And you call me on March the 10th. Let's say you call me on March 10th, you ask, I'm trying to see when the first of Nisan or the first of Abib is going to be. I would say, let me see on tomorrow if that new moon would be in the season of Abib of Nisan. If not, then more than likely, not guaranteed, the next new moon, whether it's on the 1st, whether it's on the 8th or 9th of April, will be it for sure. Because by then, we should be seeing the signs of the season of the green thumb. So what you can do at that point is, and let's say I confirm that it's still the winter season right here. And the next new moon is, let's say the next new moon is right about let's say about the 6th of April as the world observes the calendar. But let's say the 6th of April is the first of Nisan or Abib. So then you can start counting. Say the 6th. Then that means the 13th is 7 days later. On the 14th day, which will be the 20th, that's going to be the Passover. Now, that's if you're trying to keep up with it, but you want to do it as easily as possible. Now, if you want to do it like me, hey, if you've never done it before, the best thing I'll tell you is look for the first new moon that is not in the winter season, because you always want to start with the first month. If you've never kept up with the moon, but you decide I want to start keeping up with the moon, right? I would start definitely observing the moon towards the end of February on all the way through March. Because if the new moon comes and you're seeing signs of the season of the green thumb, you will know the very first new moon of the year. You will know the first of Nisan or a bee. As if you've never, ever kept up with the moon, ever. And you just started around February, March. You started just really making sure to stay on top of the moon and what the moon is doing as she keeps changing her beauty and her perfection. Because what you're looking for is this right here, the new moon. Looks like she's not there, but she's there. She's just showing a different phase of her perfection. Okay, so now let's go back to the Bible. Go back. Well, let me go to this one to see what I was looking at. Okay, I know where I want to go here. Now, with that said, right, there's also been a question of people have asked, can you truly have a new moon on the Sabbath? Yes, you can. As you see here, back in December of 2011, it's the Saturday. Look at there. New moon. So on Saturday, December the 24th, in 2011, there was not only the Sabbath, but a new moon. Not a lunar Sabbath. There is a Sabbath as well as a new moon. And that is the reason why I brought up Ezekiel 46, 1 through 6. There is a distinct difference between the Sabbath and the new moon. And nowhere in the Sabbath does it have anything to do with lunar. Because as we read in Ecclesiasticus 43, if in regards to time, there are two things to denotations of time. There are two things that the moon is there for: days and appointed times or seasons. Not anything of a 7-day week. Okay? So now let me stop sharing my screen. I'm gonna share it again, but we're gonna go back to the Bible. We're gonna stay in Leviticus. We're gonna stay in Leviticus 23, and we're gonna go to verse 24. And we're gonna get 24 and 25. Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, in the 7th month. That does not mean in July. That is the world's 7th month. How do I know it's not going to ever mean July? Well, the reason I know it will never be in July is because your new moon for a bee which is your first month. First, the first reason I know it's not going to be the month of July is because per this right here, and that's why I had you all to look at it. What's the 7th month? Is it July? Is the first month April? There is, and I addressed this with a queen before. There is a lifestyle difference in a righteous Israelite and the rest of the world, even Israelites that are in the world. Now, your regular, everyday person of Israelite descent that's in the world, You can ask them what's the name of the first month of the year, and they're going to say January. But you can ask a righteous Israelite, especially if they know this, what's the first month of the year? They're going to say one of two things, Nisan or Abib. You can ask the same two people, what is the seventh month of the year? One's going to say July. The other one is going to say Teshri. It is just that simple. All right. That's why and I reflect back to one of the examples when I see there are some people, even in the truth, that just say, you know what? I'm just gonna say April the 1st every year is the first month, or the first month of the year. When in actuality, that may not be true. That just might not be true. But because they're saying that because they know that it should be spring at that point in time. And I'm gonna be honest, it's being lazy, not doing the work. I understand it can be kind of tedious to keep up with the moon. Trust me, I understand. I do it. It becomes second nature. It's no longer a tedious ordeal. It's just I do it. I need to know what month, what season I'm in, if I'm near an appointed time or near a season. I need to know that. And that's just me. I'll be the first to say that's just me. Might not be you, but it definitely is me. I want to do that which the Bible says. It gives us, and we looked at the Passover, but you see what its appointed time or its seasoning. Its appointed time is the 14th day of the first month. Now, if you just went to a person of Israelite descent that's not in the truth and asked, what is the 14th day of the first month? They gonna say January the 14th. If you told that same person, well, you're supposed to, the reason I'm asking is because you're supposed to observe the Passover on the 14th day of the first month. And this person say, oh, for real? Okay, well, I'm gonna start observing it every 14th of January. How off would that be? Totally not in its season. So that's why you can't, it's a different life for an Israelite in the truth. The Israelite in the truth understands that the first month of the year is the first month of the season of the green thumb. They understand that they know it's the season of the green thumb because they've been keeping up with the moon. And it was at this particular new moon that the whole earth was showing signs, or where the region of the earth that they live in is showing signs of the season of the green thumb. But they didn't set in their mind that per the world's calendar, it's just April the 1st every year. April the 1st every year. Every April 14th, that'll be just as off as a person who really don't know. They saying, oh well, every 14th of January, I'm gonna observe the Passover. Every 14th of April, I'm gonna observe the Passover. And you can be just as off as a person that is not in the truth you'll be just as off as them. So it behooves you to either one, have somebody that's keeping up with the moon to keep you, to help you keep these high holy days and feast days in their season, or just keep up with it yourself. It's not hard. It's not, I promise you, it is not hard. Now, it's something new, but new does not equate to hard. New means just that. This is new for me. I don't normally, and I don't know how this is, but I've asked several times, are your eyes open now? I normally, when I look at the moon, I just look at the moon. I don't look at the moon and taking into regards its significance in regards to you, Israel. The high holy days and feast days you are to keep. Because each of these months are called by the name of a new moon. And it's all right there in scripture. So, Israel, with that, because I don't want to hold y'all too long. It's my first Truth or Thought Day. I want to thank you all for your warm embrace. Again, me coming back on, right? I know I didn't there are some people that I got to get even deeper with it with, and I can. Or I have to break it down even more so with, and I can. And I promise you, to even the ones that will say to themselves, it's still so complicated, I promise you, when you get it, it's going to be like, well, it really wasn't that complicated. It really is very simple. Okay? But again, it's something that starts at the beginning. So if you're off at the beginning of the calendar year for an Israelite, your whole calendar year is going to be off. When I'm reaching out to Israel, because people have reached out to me and are like, we're trying not to be off for our calendar year. How can we avoid, this? And these are the things that will avoid things that are covered here. But you would have to understand the significance of the moon or the high holy days. People have come to me, we're supposed to observe the lunar Sabbath. Well, where do you see anything about a lunar Sabbath? Everything I've read about the moon, I've not read anything about lunar Sabbath. Everything I read about the Sabbath, never have I seen lunar Sabbath. And that's why, that is the why for this particular truth of thought. It is because people, there are people that are conflicted. They're like, wait a minute, am I supposed to do this? Am I not supposed to do this? Or when is the Passover? Or when is the Day of Atonement? And I'll give them the answer. I'll tell them, the Day of Atonement is this day. And again, I say this and I say it a lot. It's one thing to know something. It's another thing to know why. Well, the Passover is on this day, and this is why. The reason that the Passover was on this day was because this was the 14th day of the month, the first month of Israel, which is the sun or B. This is the 14th day of that month. Thus, the 15th day started the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Now, does that mean that the 14th day is going to be on something that the world calls the 14th? No, it may be on the 18th. It may be on the 10th. but it's the 14th day of the month of Nisan or B. It's not on the 10th day of the month of April. Yes, that's how we convey it, but how do we know it's that day? Because that's the 14th day of the first calendar month of Israel. And that's why it is that day. So I'm sure I'm still going to get questions about this. It will take a long time. There's a lot of people in Israel. A lot of people in the truth. And normally people, even myself, I go back and read to make sure I'm staying. Go back and read. Go back and just refreshers for myself. Go back and read. Yeah, I remember correct. That's right. Just to refresh myself. But just to learn it. You know, there are a lot of people that just to learn it has to be broken down to a degree that they can understand it. And I'm hoping I broke it down much more for you. But again, excuse me, I'm more than willing to do it more so as I am back from my break. So everybody knows you can reach out to me on Instagram if you have any further questions. But I think I'm gonna let it rest on that for right now. Being it's my first truth thought back off break. But again, man, I love y'all and I bid you all Shabbat Shalom. Till next time, be it the most high will. It's your brother Marcus G. I'm out.